And when we first started looking at the Aries 1X and did this lean event and reorganized, one of the things that came up would be, let's make us a tiger team, a skunk works kind of approach. Get everyone together from upper stage and first stage in avionics and just get in one area, in one city, and work it through that way. And that is absolutely the ideal way to do it. That would have been the best way to go do it. But we didn't, and because we felt that we couldn't practically do that. People were making the upper stage at Glenn Research Center. It was physically being made there. I wanted those people where their hardware was being made. People were physically making the command module launch abort system at Langley Research Center. I wanted those people around where their hardware is being made, they can touch it and they can understand what the problems are and talk to their technicians real time. So while it's good to have everyone together from a management point of view and even from an engineering point of view in one city, when you pull them away from developing their hardware, you create another set of problems. So co-location helps if you really are truly co-located as a team. We wouldn't have been. The top level of the org chart would have been co-located. The implementation folks, the engineers doing the work, the people making it would not have been co-located. And to me, that was a bigger disadvantage than the advantage of doing the co-location. Even though there's a tremendous synergy for co-location, that was just too hard to go do. So if we had manufacturing where we had more typical vendors, or it was a private company and so-and-so, and we had a resident office there and they can keep tabs on them, then a co-location approach may have been a little better. But when we had actual civil servants making hardware in their location, we needed those people to stay where they are. Separately, it's very expensive to do co-location, and cost is always a factor. So was it worth bringing these people, say, hey, you're going to live in Huntsville or KSC or Langley for the next 6 months or a year? That was something that we were just weren't ready to bite off and chew. Now, the reason we know co-location works is at the end, we were essentially co-located. All the pieces were physically built. They were all shipped to KSC. The last 2 months or so, all the principals were at KSC. My management team moved there. IPTs were there for extended duration. They brought their engineering staffs with them. And by doing that, the amount of communication and the speed at solving problems was just amazing. We just worked, whenever we needed to. Problems were solved within minutes or hours compared to weeks or days. So that co-locating, when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to real-time, problems on the floor, that was ideal. And we really did a superb job of having the right folks at Kennedy Space Center at the right time to solve all those problems. One of the after-the-fact thoughts was that worked out really well. Maybe up front, what we could have done is kind of a hybrid, is pulled some of those management folks at the very beginning and spend 3 weeks or 2 months or some amount of time making sure we understand all the requirements traceability, understand the configuration management system, understand all the top level design issues before we're manufacturing, but up front in our formulation phase, then co-locate people. Then we'll get in the right mindset. We'll get past these lingo discussions. We'll understand kind of cultural or center biases and preferences. Then after that, then disperse people back to the center to start building their stuff. So if you look at a project life cycle of like a pre-phase A or a formulation stage, then a design phase and a manufacturing stage and operations phase, that formulation stage would be key to get as many people physically together in the same room. And once you get closer to manufacturing and closer to completing, once you get closer to the actual design phase, then you probably need to get people closer to where their hardware is being built to go do it that way.
There is a definite advantage to having the people that have the authority to make decisions together. There's face-to-face communication benefits that are very, they're worth a lot. And what we had done is tried to have a daily meeting with responsible, authoritative people from each IPT. And our plans were to house them, as far as an office space, all in the same area, where there's a synergy of just being around each other, the daily activities of being able to just understand what each other is actually having to deal with. And by putting those people together on an almost constant basis, there is advantage. And by saying you're going to talk together every day at a certain time, we tried that. It was some hybrid of that, but I believe where it lacked was the fact that it was not a continuous the same people weren't continuous. People, because this was from other centers, they have lives, they have families, they had to go back. So the fact that we weren't in one big bullpen together made that transition a little more difficult. When Jim was here for 2 weeks, everybody got to know who Jim was, what Jim was doing, how he operated. Everybody got that. But then when John shows up, there was a learning curve to get to know him. Where if they were all in the same room, that learning curve would be a lot quicker because you'd be immersed with each other. But the way it was is that we kind of went our separate ways and directions and came together. So while I know that sounds like putting people in a bullpen, I think that the bullpen for certain key group is important to have.
One of the things that made Ares 1X a real challenge, but which at the end of the day constituted a huge success for it, was the geographically distributed virtual mission team that it was. Operating with those 5 centers in that virtual project environment was very much a challenge. So, for example, when Bob would chair his XCB, his Ares 1X control board on Tuesday mornings, that was done virtually, so we had a WebEx and a telecon. And similarly, all of the sub-tier boards and panels that worked the different issues in both the safety and the chief engineering and the system engineering chain, because there was really 3 supporting technical chains of command that would feed data into the XCB. All of those meetings were held virtually via telecon and WebEx. And that it's a challenge. You're not there in the same meeting room. It's hard to read individuals' body language. The loud personalities on the phone call can dominate the conversation. We got into kind of the meat of the preliminary design, the critical design, and then the manufacturing of the hardware at the centers and with our contractors. The meetings tended to be more of a bilateral or trilateral nature. So the SE&I folks would have meetings associated with integrated vehicle performance and integrated design analysis and system level, vehicle level requirements development and verification. So we would go to Langley, or a subset of our team, would go to Langley and have those particular meetings focused on those disciplines. And if we were working an interface, so for example, the upper stage simulator was a particularly challenging element from the standpoint that we shared an interface, at a minimum a hardware interface, and in most cases an electrical and a fluid interface as well, with every other element both on the launch vehicle as well as the ground system. And so we had to go have those bilateral discussions one-on-one around each of those interfaces. So for example, we had meetings with the first stage folks that were out at ATK in Utah, a couple early meetings that we had to try to nail down the requirements at that interface, our upper stage to first stage interface, and so on and so forth with the other elements that we shared interfaces with. As we got into the launch campaign and started delivering hardware to the Cape and building up the vehicle in the vehicle assembly building, each IPT sent a cadre, a subset of its team, down to Kennedy Space Center to be resident at KSC and work the hands-on and really the fun tasks of physically integrating the vehicle and then processing it for launch. We sent a team of 20 folks in November of 2008 to KSC to be there when our hardware arrived and to then work the receiving inspections, as well as to finish up some manufacturing tasks that we had not finished at Glenn Research Center when we had to hit our ship window, and to then do the launch processing tasks that we had agreed to do on behalf of the integrated team. And then as we turned over each of our what we called the super segments, there were 5 super segments that we had stacked the 11 segments of the USS up into. We went through a formal custody turnover review, and we conducted that there in the vehicle assembly building with our KSC counterparts and other folks from the mission team present and did a formal review to turn over custody from the USS team to the ground ops team at KSC. So from that point forward, as we completed our custody turnovers, then we scaled down our presence to on the order of 6 or so folks, and then we always had at least one person, typically 2, resident at KSC full time from the point of custody turnover right up through launch, so that we could ensure that we had a presence on the floor in the VAB and then out at the pad in case any questions, issues, or problems came up in processing the hardware after we had turned it over to the ground ops IPT. And certainly those issues did come up, and then we would send additional folks down on a TDY basis to address them and resolve them. In every case, what I found was that getting the people together face-to-face to talk through what their issues were, what their concerns or disagreements were around the requirements or the process that was being levied on the operation, that we could, in every case, successfully resolve, find an appropriate compromise, and then proceed forward. One of the things that my personal experience during the time of processing the USS hardware at KSC reemphasized for me was something that I learned very early in my career when I started my career as a NASA system engineer at Kennedy Space Center. And that was that, when you heard that there had been a problem with the hardware or something had broken or, hey, we've got an issue that's going to delay the launch, the closer you got to the actual hardware itself, and I'm talking about going out onto the high bay floor, climbing into the super segment, and inspecting it with your very own eyes, the closer you got to the hardware, kind of the truer the story became. And so there's just no shortcut for having a presence at the launch site, being close to the hardware, and having the ability to go out and walk it down and inspect it with your very own eyes, and with the team, the stakeholders who are involved in trying to resolve that issue. You can get to the answer much faster, and you can usually get the issue resolved very quickly by being able to be out there with the hardware.
Another lesson that was valuable for us for first stage was we made a decision early on that we needed to have a presence in our various facilities. We've got a resident office at ATK and Promontory, and they helped us a lot. One of ATK's major subs was Major Tool and Machine in Indianapolis. They provided the Frustum, Fort Skirt Extension, Fissimus Simulator, all that hardware. We decided early on that we needed to have our people in their facility. ATK had their people there anyway, but we felt a lot better by putting people from our team, the first stage team, there as well. It worked out really well. Obviously, and we'd planned to do this all along, but once we got hardware in Florida, 6 months or so prior to launch, we had a presence there all the time. We rotated people out of our office here in Huntsville to Florida 2 and 3, sometimes 4 weeks at a time. And we essentially took turns, and it wasn't always just one person there. Sometimes it would be 2, depending on the processing in place. So that proved very valuable too, as far as communication.
Co-location at all levels, to me, benefited. I could see a great benefit when it occurred. For CM LAS, took me 6 months to get a team office space. Once I had that, I could see our efficiency go up enormously. Having everybody together that you could work with together, you had a question, you turned around and asked them instead of having to wait until you could get them on the phone or drive across the field was great. One of the driving reasons for where I asked for was it was the same building as Systems Engineering and Integration Office. And as they had oversight over the entire vehicle, and my primary requirements were with the interfaces that they oversaw, that was great benefit for me. Not only could I talk straight to my interfaces, but I could go to SE&I and see what it was they were looking for as well. And if one of us were missing what they were looking for, either us or our interface, we could help out with that too. And Then once we got down to Kennedy, all the co-location of all the different IPTs, and then starting to interface with ground ops and ground systems there, things really started rolling once we got there.
One thing that helped me as the management team, and presumably it helped the team, but me was, I live here in Houston. When this started off and most of the integration work was done at Langley, I moved to Langley. And I did that so I can be near most of the folks doing the integration part of it. And so your project manager and your integration folks need to be tied at the hip, because they're really implementing the decisions that you make from the integration point of view. And it was too difficult for me to do that from Houston being remote. So I moved to Langley for a year and a half to really be with those guys, day to day, side by side, so we could understand each other. Didn't talk past each other very often because we were together. And that really helped me understand what was important to them, what was driving the overall integration, what their challenges were, but also to put things in a way that they could actually understand based on their background and go do. And once all the hardware got to KSC, I moved to Florida for a while, for 9 months. And then since I was there every day, I wasn't just visiting for a couple of weeks and back home for a couple of weeks. People would know where I sat. People would drop by. They'd have questions or concerns. I was on the floor 2 or 3 times a day. I walked through all our processing. But physically being there as a manager, it's very much the management by walking around. By doing that just over and over again and over and over again, people would come up to me, technicians would say, hey, I'm worried about this. How come we're doing this? And, I'd tell them whatever I knew. But having the connection with the folks doing the work on the floor is something I wouldn't have got if I was just visiting every couple of weeks. But being there, and I can come at midnight if I needed to, I can come at 2 in the morning if I needed to. And I'd see them on the weekend when they were working. I'd come in, and just by getting that relationship and being able to be there so often, I think helped speed any kind of issues that were bubbling up. I would often hear about them before other folks because I was there on the floor where they were back in Huntsville or they were back in Virginia. But when you're there and you see it happening, you understand the context of it, and you know whether to worry more so about it or less, as opposed to reading it on a chart the next day or hearing from a telecon. So for me to co-locate to I consider the key areas of effort. So during the formulation, design phase, the integration part of it was really key. That was the key to the whole project and the biggest challenge. So moving to Virginia was important. When we put the vehicle together, that really was where our energy was focused. So being there where the hardware wasn't enabling for me. So I think other project managers should consider where is the center of gravity of their project. And is it in their center? Is it at a contractor's facility? Is it at the operations center? And find a way to get close to that, and really close to the point that you forge relationships with those people. And I think you'll have a much better understanding of what's really happening with your project if you do it that way.
If you are trying to do an important job like this, another flight test, or even something of a different science or aerospace nature, I think co-location cannot be underestimated. A number of us moved down to Florida for the last 8 or 9 months of the mission, which was terrific. Personally, I believe that we needed to have more face-to-face time ahead of time. Now, I understand that there's complexities. My wife works. My kids are in school. I understand what all this means. But the co-location greatly facilitates the communication. Having said that, with a diversified team like we had basically a virtual management team that talked all the time, and we personally got along very well. Some of my closest friends are people that I've met on this project. And so that helped quite a bit. But the co-location, in my book, is a very, very important thing. Had we done it earlier, I believe that as good as we did, we could have gotten through some things a little quicker had we all been located in the same area. And maybe that co-location would take the form of maybe 3 weeks together or 4 weeks together at a certain time, and then going back to our offices or our homes and then going back. But when we got down to the Cape, most of us moved to the Cape for the last 8 or 9 months. That made a huge difference as we stepped through the integration and testing. Early on, it would have been good too when we were doing requirements and performance analysis.